Yeah, so as Mel said, it's really exciting that we've been able to kick off our network meetings again. I think it's a really exciting opportunity for us to come together a little bit more regularly to share ideas, to share opportunities, and I guess to also make it what our members of the network would really like to get out of them. So firstly, before I go on, I'd just like to do the acknowledgement of country. So we acknowledge that we work and live on the traditional lands of many Aboriginal clans, tribes and nations. Aboriginal people are the proud custodians of the longest surviving culture in the world. We commit to research in true partnership with Aboriginal communities and peoples, and to research that reflects this strength and resilience. And I'm coming to you from Wiradjuri land today. So yes, another formal welcome. As I mentioned, we're really excited to kick off the network meetings. And as we were planning these meetings, our initial topics are based on a survey that our WHRN network members completed at last year's research symposium. So one of the really key educational and learning needs or areas to discuss was the challenges recruiting participants to research. So we're really excited that we have such a great keynote invited speaker today with Dr. Kristy Robson. But as we move forward, please do send through any requests that you may have for any of our network sessions moving forward, and I will put some of the contact details in the chat at the end, as well as on the final slide. But before we do hear from our fantastic speaker and share our experiences, there are a couple of exciting things that we would like to mention. And the first is to remind everybody about the upcoming WHRN Symposium, which will be held on the 3rd and 4th of November at the CSU campus in Orange. So this year's theme is Building Research Networks, Collaborative Approaches to Rural Health Research. And Mel, as the chair of the scientific committee, I'm sure you can vouch, we've had some great abstracts submitted. I think, was it close to 100?
Yep, 98 this year.
Excellent. So we have some really fantastic research presentation alongside some really exciting invited speakers and keynote speakers. So do consider coming along. Early bird pricing does end on the 30th of September, and please go to the website for further details, the program that's coming together, and to register. And that is the second exciting thing we would like to mention, is that we have refreshed the WHRN website, and that's thanks to some incredible work by Joe Hunter. So do jump on and have a look at what we can offer there on the WHRN website. And Catherine, is there anything that you'd like to add?
No, not at this point. Thanks, Shannon. I think you've covered it all.
Excellent. So I think now we can move along to our topic for discussion today. So as I mentioned, this is one of the key themes that came through in the survey, that, you know, we're all facing a lot of challenges recruiting participants to our research in rural areas. And we have the absolute pleasure of hearing from our experienced researcher, Dr. Kristy Robson. Following that, we'll have opportunities for any questions if you want to pop them in the chat, or at the end, we can, if you wanted to put your hand up on the screen, we can come around to hear any questions. But also, we really would like to open the floor up to have some discussions about your own challenges and your own wins that maybe we can all learn from. So I'm very pleased to introduce our speaker. Kristy is a Senior Research Fellow with the Three Rivers Department of Rural Health at Charles Sturt University. She has significant experience working as a clinician, academic and researcher in rural and regional areas for the past 30 years, contributing to improving health outcomes for community members living in rural and regional Australia. Kristy has undertaken extensive research in the areas of healthy ageing, chronic disease, mental health, and rural health service evaluation. She has a keen interest in influencing health policy and system reform through her role on the New South Wales Ministerial Advisory Council on Ageing and as chair of the Podiatry Board of Australia under AHPRA. In addition, Kristy is chair of the Research Staff Network for the Australian Rural Health Education Network, where she works to strengthen collaboration and research capacity across rural health academics nationally. She also hosts the Rural Researcher podcast series, which provides an accessible platform for sharing insights, challenges, and opportunities in rural health research. And as a listener to that podcast, I strongly recommend to jump on and have a listen. So I will stop sharing and hand over to you, Kristy. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Shannon. And obviously, this is a really topical thing, and maybe we need to do a podcast on this topic. So I'll keep that in the back of my mind. So thank you so much for inviting me to present today. I suppose I'm not an expert on everything recruitment, and I suppose one of the key issues that I suppose got me here today was probably we've been doing some mental health research in the last couple of years, and we had used our strategies and did a whole range of different things, and unbeknownst to me, unbeknownst to the research team, it was a complete disaster. And so we were talking a lot about some of the challenges that we had in that particular project, and we decided to do a conference presentation, and that was probably, we got the most impact of just talking about some of those challenges, which then led us to actually write a paper for the Australian Journal of Rural Health on this particular topic. So I think it was, quite interesting to be working in this space. So I do have a couple of slides, so I might just share my screen. Okay, so I think I'm sharing the wrong screen now. Hang on a sec. All right, so share. I think I'm just going to have to do it this way. Anyway, so basically what I'm going to be doing today is just talking a little bit around some of the challenges that we identified, some of the strategies that we have now thought about. And as you become more and more experienced as a researcher, you get to learn a lot of things along the way. And sometimes you wish you had that knowledge way back when. So it can always be a real challenge in that, I suppose, perspective. So, so really, I suppose just to frame it, why should we be doing research within a rural area? And, as someone that's a very big proponent of doing place-based research, I think it's really important that we should, even despite all of the challenges that we sometimes come across, that we should be actually persisting and trying to actually get that research done. And there's a number of reasons for that. And firstly, equity. We really want equity in evidence. And so it's really important that, because things are hard, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't at least try to actually get the voices of rural people. And we really want to ensure that those rural voices are represented in both national and global research evidence. And really, we want to be avoiding any sort of policy designs that are only based on metro-centric views. We obviously know that rural Australia is very diverse, so there is contextual relevance. So rural communities have distinct cultural norms, health beliefs, and obviously service access patterns. And obviously research without understanding these really risks those types of things being ineffective. The third thing is obviously a really interest of mine is around policy impact as well. So obviously data from rural participants really strengthens advocacy for resource allocation, workforce planning, and really tailoring health policies for our rural communities. And, the next thing really is around that innovation and resilience. So, rural communities can just be by the creativity and the resilience and the amazing ideas with. And so community due to thinking about things really differently, and it really informs wider practice. I think the other thing is that real trust in research as well. I think rural communities themselves, it's important for them to be represented, and that obviously builds trust and improves uptake from research-informed services. I think that there is a lot of, there can be a lot of mistrust when, particularly researchers from not that area come in, do the research and then leave. And, people feel like they didn't actually, it wasn't a partnership. They weren't valued. They gave the information and then there's really nothing happened, or, I think that there's lots of challenges in that space. And obviously closing the health gaps as well. So, recruitment efforts supports that reduced rural-urban disparities in health outcomes, and because you're getting the voices and you're actually getting that advocacy through your research. And obviously that final one there is around global applicability. And so obviously rural research in Australia offers real lessons for other countries facing similar geographic and demographic challenges. And, Shannon mentioned my podcast, and I really set that up very much for, just rural Australians, but I was really surprised by how many other international people reached out to me saying, we're having similar issues in our own country. So I think that, we can obviously, if we identify really innovative practice, can actually have effect as well. So that's really useful. So what are the key challenges? Well, obviously, some of the key challenges that we faced in our particular project. So our project was based around identifying I did was that we wanted to get really diverse voices, and so we disseminated our particular project on Facebook, because we knew that older people tended to use Facebook more than some of the other social media aspects, and we did try to actually utilise other organisations that we were connected with, and surprising, within a couple of days of us actually promoting it on Facebook, we ended up getting all of these responses going, we want to be part of your project. And we were going, wow, this is really amazing. But what actually transpired is they were all AI bots. And so it was really, really hard to, utilising that I suppose it's an easy resource because you can actually disseminate across quite broadly, but, clearly they weren't actually real people. So it made it a real problem. And when we did get and because we were paying participants for their time, but there was criteria. So they had to live in a rural area within Australia. They needed to have an Australian bank account. We actually got a lot of participants from overseas that then said, we're living in Australia, and we went through all of the screening things. And then when they actually came to the online interview, some of them wouldn't put their cameras on, some of them put cameras on but had curtains closed, and then really once it sort of unfolded, they didn't have Australian bank accounts, and so they were overseas people just trying to actually gain the benefit of that money. So I think that was a really challenging aspect to us and trying to recruit. I think some of the other key things that really came up that obviously, people, and not just in that project, but more broadly in some of my other projects is, when we're trying to recruit participants for particular programs or other types of research, there's always those issues around geographic isolation. And, one thing that's really, I feel like I'm a little bit more cluey these days when writing grant applications is actually then embedding costs around transport, because that's not something that we'd really thought about before, because, lots of people, if you want them to actually come to the program, then they've got to be able to get there easily. And so that can be a big barrier for lots of people. I mean, the next thing is obviously that variability in digital access. And so I think lots of people, if you, depending on the project, if you're doing it online, then sometimes it's not always that great, and people don't have always great access or digital health literacy. there's always sometimes low trust and skepticism towards research as well, which you're often combating against. And for us also, you know, if we wanted to actually, we had approached this by one-on-one interviews, but one of the things that came out of that research ended up being that people feel really reluctant to actually come into a group setting, particularly if it's a sensitive topic like mental health, and they didn't want to share their ideas because there's some really great things about rural communities because people sort of look after each other, but that also means that you're quite visible, and so once everybody sort of knows certain things, then that visibility is quite open, and so people can be really reluctant in that aspect. And then obviously the spam bots and the AI generated fake responses is obviously quite a challenge as well, and with technology changing so quickly, I think researchers, we have to be really adaptable to that. So and so finally, just, you know, some suggested solutions. So some of the things that we've sort of reflected on and things that we want to be actually thinking about when we're designing research projects, whether that's for funding or just designing them for that are unfunded, is really to plan realistically. So, you know, we know that the recruitment process takes so much longer within a rural area because you don't have a critical mass. So you have to be planning that within your timelines. And it actually takes a lot more resources. You know, if you have a really good connection in a metro area to a particular cohort, then that's really great. You can probably, you know, get on top of that with a certain amount of resources. But often in rural areas, you actually need a lot more resources to get that critical mass and recruit and go back and build that trust with communities as well. And then aligning to that is actually having achievable targets. So, you know, it may not be achievable if you're doing a particular project and you need 150 people from, you know, one community. So it is really important to actually have those achievable targets. What we find is obviously finding champions on the ground is really something that can be very useful. So partnering with trusted sources, because people tend to be more likely to engage if they're invited to by a trusted source. The other thing too is that, you know, it's really useful because they, you know, those trusted sources or those champions on the ground will often know the people that should be involved. And so, you know, you get a bit of that snowballing effect. So that can be really useful. And then obviously building that trust. And so authentic competence so that people feel that they're being valued as well. So I think it is, you know, it can be a bit of a slow burn sometimes. And sometimes if you're wanting to actually apply for a grant or, you know, you're building a research project, then spending time with people before that so that they've got that connection with you can actually be really, really useful. The value add is something that I really feel, you know, very passionate about. And I think that, you know, we have actually sort of changed the way that I've been doing a bit of recruitment lately, particularly. And so, you know, if you're doing a particular topic and you want to actually recruit participants, actually going and giving a presentation to the local group and actually building that rapport and trust with that individual group and actually giving them something in return. And so as an example of that, obviously Mel and I have a healthy aging program that we are rolling out, and we have just got a program started last week. And so some of the strategies that I did was go to like University of the Third Age and gave a presentation, but as not just gave that presentation, I provided them with a handbook with some tips and tricks around how to keep active, how to keep your mind active. And so they actually felt that they got something in return. And then, you know, that was an opportunity to actually then explain what our program was about. And they had an opportunity to ask questions. And, you know, I just wanted to actually recruit 12 people from that particular presentation, but there was 20 that wanted to all come along. So I think that, you know, that value add, it's not all about us going and trying to get something from individuals. It's what can we actually give them as well that can actually really help build that trust, and they're more likely to be engaged in the research. I think diversifying approaches is really important. So utilizing one approach doesn't generally work. I think we need to be really very broad and open that up to a whole range of different channels, and engaging with different groups and actually spending the time and understanding that community and where those people might actually be collating or engaging, what spaces, what sort of groups that they're in, so that you can actually go and really tap into those areas. Obviously, we all know about co-design, and I think that that's really important, but I think sometimes it's the step back and actually going, well, if I'm wanting to do this project, say next year, maybe I should be starting to do a couple of things with some groups to sort of get a good idea and who to tap into, and spend time actually with people with lived experience to go, who's going to be the best people, who's going to be the local champion that I can liaise with. Doing all that prep work is actually really useful for recruitment. And then obviously cast far and wide and often. So using networks of networks and using that snowballing type approach can actually be really, really useful. And if you're known within the community and you're a trusted source, that it actually works through well. Or if you're not, then utilizing peak organizations. So just going back to like Mel and I's topic of wellness to age, like utilizing CODA New South Wales, they're absolutely fantastic advocate for our program, and so they are a trusted source. So if we want to actually run something or promote something, they just put it in their newsletter, and you can actually get that broadly across all of New South Wales. And so utilising peak organisations can actually be a really, really useful strategy as well. So just finally, some key takeaway messages. The big one is, the value add. So what is it that you can provide to particular groups, whether it's health promotion, education, some tips or tricks or whatever the project is, to actually, make it that those individuals feel like they're getting something out of this, and then they're more likely to go, yeah, I'm happy to be part of this research and so forth. Fostering community relationships. This can be a slow burn, and sometimes the first project you do, it's not always great recruitment, but the more you spend within the community, the more you get that reputation and people will trust you. So I think that that's really important, and having those key champions on the ground is also really important as well. Using sort of those diverse methods, multiple, whether it's using social media, whether it's engaging with peak organizations, peak groups, community groups. I think you just need to actually be looking at a really diverse spread in order to get as many recruitment as possible, and obviously building that trust and ensuring that communities feel like they're getting something out of it while you're also getting something out of it. So they're really the key things that we found as part of the particular project that we did in the mental health, but also more broadly in some of the other projects that we are doing. But I think, for those that are actually applying for grants, I think we actually need to be a lot more smarter around putting in extra resources, because I think that it's we really underestimate how much time, cost and resources it takes to actually do a really good project within a rural community setting. So and I think that there should be probably greater recognition of that from the funders, and pushing that from a policy perspective as well. So happy to have discussion or hear other people's thoughts on their challenges and opportunities and successes, or answer any questions. So I'll just stop sharing.
Thank you, Kristy. That was fantastic. So many great insights and good suggested solutions. I'm sure a lot of those challenges resonated with many of us attending today. So absolutely like to open up for any questions for Kristy. Joe? Oh, sorry, I've jumped the gun. I didn't see yours was slower coming up. Sorry, Jodie, I'll head to you first.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Thanks for your presentation, Kristy. I found it really interesting. I was just interested in if you had a perspective of why people from overseas were wanting to participate. Like, given that you'd gone through screening, I know it's just maybe a silly question, but I'm interested in if you had a perspective on that.
In those particular circumstances, circumstances, I think it was purely the financial incentive.
So you did pay them? Because I missed that. Sorry, I thought you said there wasn't a financial incentive.
No,
but there was.
There was
right.
a financial incentive, and so and I think and it is quite common to be remunerating consumers now for their time, and I think that we just need to be really aware that there are unintended consequences for remunerating people for their time, because you can get some of these challenges. And it was clear, we suspect that the couple that we had were maybe in Africa, or one of those sort of nations, and so but they didn't get paid because they didn't have an Australian bank account. So.
Did you learn anything about how to screen? Like, did you pick up on anything about methods of screening?
Look, I think it was really, I think the challenge these days is AI is so good at actually, providing responses to people that may not be, English is a first language, but even with Australia, like, we always have a very multicultural type society too. So, I think it is really, really difficult, but I think that we went through all of the screening processes with these particular people, and they said yes, and you can only take it on their word. So it is really, I think it's a really difficult one, but it was something that we got so surprised with, because we had thought this would never happen. Like, it wasn't even something in our realm that we thought would happen. So, I think that it was quite a shock to us.
Thanks.
Sorry, Jo, I'll come back to you now.
Thanks. Thanks, Kristy. That was excellent. I was just wondering, with the responses that you found were AI, did you see that was coming from the Facebook post that you did, or was it more a bot in the background that was trawling wherever the recruitment was held online, or could you track that?
So basically the way that it came, so in the Facebook page or the social media page, we had, if you're interested, please email us at this address. And so we got lots and lots of responses, and it was clearly that it wasn't actually a human generated response, because of the way, some of it was, and I think they're going to get cleverer at it, because some of it was, thank you so much for this, I'm really interested in participating, blah 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 blah, but they were happening at 3 a.m. in the morning or 4 a.m. in the morning. So there was a whole spate of them coming through at different times. But then smattered in that was actually really real life people that were wanting to be involved as well. So it took us a lot of time to actually shift through, because I think within a week we got over 150 responses. And so, it took us quite a while to actually shift through and make sure that we had ensured that all of those responses were AI and not actually real life people that we were just dismissing. So that was really challenging. I think it was just AI bots screening, the social media post.
Facebook itself. And did you do any paid ads with Facebook and target your audience on Facebook, or was that just a blanket Facebook post?
Yeah, so not in that particular project, but I think that this I think that also speaks to, you raise a really good point around, thinking about your recruitment strategy having a little bit more thought and having the resources. And, I don't know whether we would get the same if we got paid with a paid ad, but we might have, I don't know, but we didn't pay for that particular ad, no.
Right, yeah. I think it would be interesting if a more targeted ad would actually reduce the amount of bot traffic that you got. Okay, thank you.
You do highlight such a challenge, though, by having to sift through and ensure that you're not missing, any true participants. I can imagine that was time consuming, and wanting to check every, tick all the boxes. Absolutely. Over to you, Mel.
Sorry, there's a long delay on taking the mute off. I think probably picking up on what you were just saying then about being more targeted, one of the things that we recently
I guess, had some experience with in terms of trying to recruit. And again, it was an older population from the community, so not people who were engaged with health services, but just general older people who are members of the community members. And what we found was that, whether we were doing a newsletter advert or a Facebook advert or a radio piece, that even though our actual project was wanting all members of the community, when we did a really generic, we want anyone over the age of 65, we didn't get a lot of response. But if we did one radio ad that said, we really are interested in hearing about men's experiences are so important to us. If you're over 65 and you're a man and you would like to share your experiences, come and talk to us. Through the roof. And then we do another one. Women's experiences over 65 are really, really important to us. If you're a woman and you're over 65, come and talk to us. And so the general, even though that's what we were wanting, we wanted everyone, it was, we got hardly any uptake. But if we were really specific about, if you are a carer, if you have a disability, if you are this, if you are, because people then really went, oh, that's me. Oh, they really want to hear from people like me. I better pick up the phone and call them. And so in the end, we got a really general mix of people, but by doing a series of targeted advertisements rather than one general one, which I thought is a very interesting sort of to understand what it is that people respond to in a recruitment advertisement. It was, yeah, when it was very general, not so great. But if it was really specific and people thought that they were that group, they then were like, oh, well, I've got something really important to say here. I better jump in one.
Yeah. And I think, I think that that's a really great point. And I think often people think, oh, well, they'll have plenty of people in that, because if it's really broad, oh, I have plenty of people, so I don't need to actually put my hand up. Whereas if you really make it specific, then I think people tend to want to actually engage more, because as you say, they can relate to what you're actually saying rather than just being very vague.
Thanks, Mel. Back to you, Jodie. Thank you.
Oh, we can't really hear you, Jode.
Oh, sorry.
There you go. Now we can hear you. Oh, now we can't.
You now? Yeah?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so sorry. Further to the promotion of the promotion component, I was interested in, I guess, that aspect of promoting the financial incentive versus not, because obviously you want it to get people along, but you don't want to get the people along just for the money. Do you know what I mean? Because I think I feel like there's some literature out there around that kind of appeal, but I wonder if you came across any or what you thought about it.
We had just made a decision that we were going to pay people for their time, and to be honest, we hadn't thought much more extension on that, and just the social media posts went up saying, here's what we want and you will be paid for your time, and we didn't really think about it too much. But I think you make a really good point around when do you tell people that are interested, and I think
because it's a good incentive to get people along, like you can see, but you want to get the right people along for the right reasons too, I guess, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where you have to have the diversity of, I suppose, different techniques. And so it was a little bit difficult for us because we were wanting quite broadly across Australia rather than one geographic area. But, if we were just going to do this project in one geographic area, we would have probably changed the way that we approached it and done more in community type recruitment strategies. But yeah, I think it is a challenge.
Little project in there, Kristy. Little paper.
Just add to our workload.
With all the spare time that you've got. Sorry. Thanks.
Over to you, Rebecca. Thank you.
Kristy, for your thoughts on specifically recruiting healthcare workers or clinicians in rural areas, and whether you think, we need a sort of separate considerations. I think particularly about GPs who in general are so, over targeted, and we want them so much involved in our research, but whether you've got any thoughts or experiences with healthcare workers as well.
Yeah, look, I think healthcare workers are also a bit of a challenge because they are really, really busy. I think GPs tend to respond to financial incentives if they're actually going to be paid the time. But I think that also should be probably for all health professionals if you're actually contributing. It is one strategy, but I suppose it really just depends on what is, what your project is likely to be. And I think the other thing is really going back to that value add. So what is the health clinician or the health practitioner actually getting out of that opportunity to engage? And is that actually really clear? And so, if you are wanting to do something on a new evidence-based sort of project or something, then, doing a bit of a PD session where they're actually, you're providing like the current guidelines or the current approaches, and doing that and giving them a certificate to say, come along to this PD session and we'll look at it as a, CPD event. And then use that as a tool to recruit as well, I think is also a really good strategy. So I think, again, it goes back to, that value add. What is it that you can contribute to you with your expertise? And, what can you, that would be of benefit for those health professionals to encourage them to come along? Because I think when they get an emails, they just constantly bombarded with emails, and it's like, come join us for this research project. But if you actually then design it around a CPD event and then promote the research alongside of that, I think you often get more success because they feel they're getting something, and then they're more willing to actually contribute to that research if that's, been of a benefit to them.
I think there's such key insights, and if I reflect on a student project that we did a couple of years ago where we were really limited for time, we were looking at the use of dermatoscopy and both education in dermatoscopy for our GPs across a few different rural and regional health districts. But you're absolutely right. I think we got quite terrible response rate, and we tried to look at casting the net far and wide by reaching out to all of the individual GP surgeries through practice managers. We went through college emails, tried different Facebook groups, so tried really hard, but I think where we fell down was our promotion of that research and what we could value add for them. So some really key things for us to take away, well, for me certainly moving forward. Who are we up to now? Catherine.
Yeah, hi. Sorry, I wasn't sure if I was on mute or not still. I was just going to second your comments, Kristy, about the challenges with the GPs. So we do a lot of work with GPs, and the most recent work we did was interviewing GPs around their use of e-prescribing. Mel and I did that with Sam, and yeah, the payments were in line with their expectations around salary. So we've had uptake as poor as like 3% from some GP surveys.
Look, I think that everybody is busy, and I think that people get health professionals themselves in rural areas are probably overstretched anyway, and so that can be a real challenge for recruitment, and sometimes it's much easier just to say no because it's just all too hard. But yeah, I do think if you can tag it into something that's value added for them, you're more likely to get that, and whether that's monetary, because obviously that's a value add for them, or some other mechanism like CPD or those types of things can actually be really useful incentives.
I might just jump in there and add a couple of things that in that particular project that Catherine's referring to. I asked most of the GPs, because I think in the end we had about 30 GPs who did interviews with us, which was more than we had been expecting. So it was great. And I did ask people about, why did you respond to this request and not others? Because I said, you know, do you say yes to very many research activities? And people say, no, never. So the things that people said, and I thought this was really interesting. So most GPs don't look at something that comes into their email inbox. They just say, I just don't have time. So if it comes into my email inbox, I'm not going to look at it. If that's the only way that you're going to contact me, you probably won't get me. But so what we did was we partnered with the Western New South Wales Primary Health Network, and they sent it out via their newsletter, their electronic newsletter. And the electronic newsletter had a QR code on it. And there were so many people said to me that they now trust QR codes more than links embedded in an email or links embedded in a text message. So I think, you know, because people become so familiar with QR code scanning, and it seems like there's not too many scams attached to QR code scanning as there are to links in emails or links in text messages, that people felt that was, going to your point about trust, Kristy, it was a more trustworthy process of nominating to be part of the research project. So the QR codes were actually better than links. I think that was interesting. But the fact that it came to them via, even though it was still via an electronic newsletter, but it came via the PHN newsletter, which they needed to look at because it had particular information in it for them, for their practice. So there was a reason for them to look at it. And they were really clear. They said if it had just said, you know, email about research, they wouldn't have opened it at all. So I think that whole process of piggybacking onto you know, newsletters, whether it was, you know, in this instance, it was the Primary Health Network. Kristy's talked about us using COTA, New South Wales. But, you know, there's heaps of newsletters that go out through all different organisations. Being able to actually get a promo into one of those with a scannable QR code, I think has a better uptake if you're wanting sort of electronic uptake. And the other one that was suggested to me recently, this was by one of the community members on our on a project where we're focusing on developing resources for people with intellectual disability to access healthcare. And she said, Mel, I don't even like going to my GP, so I'm not going to sit there and look at all the things that are on the wall at the GPs, because really all I want to do is close my eyes and shut my ears so I don't have to pay any attention to what's going on when I'm sitting and waiting for my GP. She said, the place where I am happiest, where I'm most likely to say yes, is at the Bunnings sausage sizzle on a Saturday morning. So why doesn't CSU get a Bunnings? And she said, when people are happy, they're open, they're willing to say yes to things. And she's like, Bunnings sausage sizzle, that's where you'd get me to say yes to something. And I thought,
see,
it's so
value
true.
add. Food is a value add.
Value add, I know. But I think it was, you know, that idea of you've got to get people when they're open and willing to say yes. And it was such an interesting insight that she said, yeah, when she gets to her doctor and she's got to wait, she literally puts her headphones on and looks down and, you know, puts her cap down over her so that she doesn't, you know, the sensory stimulation of being in the GP clinic, she hates it. She said, so if you've got a poster on the wall in there or a flyer on a table, she said, I'm not going to look at it because all I'm doing is going, get me out of here, get me out of here, get me out of here, get me out of here. And she said, even if I picked it up, I'm not going to be in a positive frame of mind to say yes to doing that thing, even if it was highly desirable. So she said, get me at a time when I'm feeling good, and that's when I'll say yes to you. So I thought that's also another really interesting insight for us as researchers to think about, like, the emotional place that people are in to say yes to being part of research, and how do we get people when they're in a good place rather than a distressed place.
Absolutely. Anybody else have any other questions, or would you like to share any of your own other challenges or wins maybe for recruiting any participants to your research?
I will share a win that we've had recently. One of our students did a project on was recruiting for interviews for Klinefelter syndrome. So that's a sex chromosomal aneuploidy. And we actually managed to get in touch with the AXIS, so it's the Australian X and Y chromosome support groups, and a couple of other Genetics Alliances Australia. And they have a really tight social media community. And we had some discussions with key leaders in both of those organisations, and they were very supportive. So they were very strong in sharing our recruitment materials and obviously endorsing the research. And we ended up with like 25 interviews, I think, in about 3 days. Like, as in, 25 expressions of interest. It was phenomenal. So I guess it's just targeting, if there's any key organisations that can support in distribution and recruitment, then it's certainly worthwhile identifying those and investing that time.
Yes, absolutely. Jodie?
Thanks. I think further to maybe what Catherine was saying, we had recently had some success when we were doing some research with people who are accessing home care services. But they had like a support group that ran on a regular basis. So we worked with the organisation and we went to where they were rather than having to get them to come to us, I guess. And they were much more willing to be involved because it was somewhere that they went every week. There was an activity that they could be involved in. There was clearly a level of interest and we were partnering with the organisation. So I guess there were factors that played into that. But we certainly got a really good uptake because we went to them. I guess it was somewhere familiar. They were with people that they knew, they were happy to share. We also did things that supported them to complete the questions we were asking. Another thing we did with some First Nations research was had people in the community that would sit with members of the community. It was a survey at the time rather than an interview, but they sat with members of the community and helped them complete the surveys so that they could, if there was something they didn't understand. Obviously it has an impact on your sampling method, but I think it's just about being transparent and it's about getting the responses and having that authentic kind of input rather than necessarily having that generalizable output if you're looking for the bigger number of people.
Well, thank you so much, Kristy. That was a fantastic presentation and has obviously generated a lot of discussion. And I'm very grateful for everybody for sharing your experiences and tips. It's been extremely beneficial for me as well and does promote a lot of reflection on how we can do better. And obviously a lot of us are facing those time constraints, but also funding constraints, but thinking outside the square of how we can connect and value add. So thank you so much. I'm very appreciative of your time. I am just going to share my screen again. Sorry, I've got too many things open. Can you see the screen now, everybody? Strategies and resources
Thanks,
screen.
Shannon.
Thanks, Mel. So just to move on, we did have a request from a current researcher, Dr. Christopher Hayward, and we were thinking as a network, this can be a great way where we can support one another as a group to share our research that's underway, particularly when we are facing some challenges in recruiting participants. So I will put this into the chat once I stop sharing, but just wanting to share his request here. So he's come from the University of Sydney, the School of Rural Health, so some of you may know Dr. Hayward, and they're looking at a research study about the roles and responsibility of medical educators in rural Australia. So there is a gift voucher worth $100 provided if you meet that criteria to complete that online questionnaire. So I will put that, as I mentioned, into the chat. So please do feel free to share appropriately, and it has got that ethics approval there. And this is something that the WHRN executive will consider further about how we can sort of formalise and promote research for one another moving forward. So watch this space, and there may be a section on the website where we can look to do that. So really now we're looking just to wrap up the meeting. If there's any other further comments, and because I'm sharing my screen, I can't see. So feel free to just interrupt and speak. But the other thing I would really like to mention is if there is any other topics of great interest that you would like us to consider for the network sessions, please do send those through. But most excitedly, hopefully to see you all at the WHRN Symposium that's coming up. And they're the contacts that I will put in the chat. But I'll just stop sharing so I can see all of your faces. Any last comments, or are we ready to wrap up?
Thanks so much, Shannon, for bringing us all back together. And yeah, thanks, Kristy, for your presentation.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to put the those links in the chat now, but you should still obviously have access to that once you leave. So thank you again.